fun of getting to work with 4 amazing panelists who I handpicked because I love their work. I am going to introduce them to you in just a second, but to frame this discussion about why we're talking about happiness and technology in the workplace, I think all too often we find that happiness in the workplace is seen as a luxury. It seems like really nice if you're able to be happy in your job, but pretty much we just need to get through the day. And I think we can do better than that. I think when we're looking towards the future of happiness and where we want to be going, that there's so much more we aspire to as a community. And these 4 individuals are some of the individuals who are leading that discussion and changing practices in the workplace, each in very different ways. I'm really excited because they come from such different backgrounds, and I think they're going to make for a really rich discussion. So I'm going to give a short overview of each person, and then I'm going to let them tell you a little bit more about their work, and then I'll throw them the hardest questions I can think of all at once. So first of all, we have Jonathan Pally, and Jonathan is the CEO of Spire, which is a wearable device that helps measure respiration and teaches you about your mindfulness through that device. Dr. Anil Sipahimalani. I got it. Been practicing. He works with Cigna on their virtual reality relaxation pod, which is using brain breaks at work to be able to help you restore to become more productive and find better flow at work. Jen Moss is the co-founder and CEO of Neuroplasticity Labs, and it is a cognitive training platform that's being used in workplaces in some just amazing ways all throughout Canada as well as in the United States. And Pooja is working with Novalex Technologies, and the founder of Novalex Technologies, which is a window into the future for all of us. It is literally a window that creates an ability for you to see the outside world in places where you can't have access to windows. So that's just a teaser of what's coming. But I'm going to let each one of them share a little bit with you about their background. So we're going to start with, actually, Anil, if you don't mind starting us off, because I'm going to give a slide. Go ahead.
Thank you, Amy. It's really a pleasure to be here in front of all of you to share some of the work we've been doing at Cigna in the area of using virtual reality paired with mindfulness stress reduction in a really calm and peaceful environment. Our whole aim here is to improve the happiness of the workforce and to reduce stress that people feel at work. So our solution was developed by our software engineering departments in collaboration with Cigna Behavioral Health. So our engineers, in collaboration with our in-house psychologists, the engineers worked on the software and the virtual reality scenarios, and the psychologists, who are also mindfulness experts, worked on developing the tracks that are paired with the virtual reality scenarios. And we feel the combination really has the potential to promote relaxation and happiness in folks who go through the experience. So on the slide, what you see there is what we call the pod. And the pod is really an egg-shaped, really comfortable chair. And I hear from people who sit in the pod a couple of things. One is, it's so comfortable, I never want to get up. And for those of us who are older, the pod is low to the floor, and it's not that easy to get up. The other thing I hear is, I just want to take a nap in here. And the third thing I hear, which I'm guilty of as well, is I just want to kind of take the pod home and kind of have it in my living room as a chair to just lounge and relax in. But bottom line, it's a really comfortable environment. It's also noise canceling. So when you sit in the pod, it's like you're in your own enclosed space. The world kind of drifts away around you. And what we do is we pair that with either our Oculus goggles or a Gear VR to produce a series of different virtual reality, immersive, 360-degree experiences. So our software engineers have developed different scenarios, including a Zen garden, including a beautiful tropical beach, and my favorite, which is an underwater scenario. In the underwater scenario, you feel like you're just underwater. You can see beautifully colored fishes swimming around you. You can see bubbles rising to the water. You can see coral reefs. If you look down, you see the ocean floor. It's really incredibly relaxing. And along with that, it's paired with the mindfulness, relaxation, teaching you how to relax your muscles, how to get away from the stress at work, be mindful, live in the moment. It's really a very powerful, powerful experience. We have done some studies with this technology, and in fact, we did present this technology at the American Psychological Association meeting in Minneapolis this year, and I'm really excited to say that it's been preliminarily accepted for publication in the International Journal of Stress and Productivity. So hopefully it should be published sometime later this year. So in our study, what we found is we took our own Cigna workers, many of whom are working in a really busy, stressful call center type environment, and we had them go through this experience for approximately 10 to 15 minutes for over about a 6-week period of time. We measured their blood pressure, both pre and post. We measured their pulse, again, both pre and post. And we also had an informal, very brief stress questionnaire. And the results were really, really interesting for us. We found that most people experienced a measurable decrease in blood pressure. Most people, a lot of people, in fact, experienced a reduced pulse rate. And almost everyone said that stress level was reduced. Even more important than that, than reducing the stress level, is we feel we brought in a cohort of people who would never have experimented with mindfulness or yoga or Tai Chi or any other mindfulness stress-based reduction type technology because they were drawn in by the technology. A lot of those were folks in the younger generation who, as we all know, we all love technology, but them particularly so. So we feel that technology has the ability to draw them in, and then they get more exposed and more interested in even exploring mindfulness-based techniques after that. So we feel we have just scratched the surface. We are doing more studies as we speak, and we feel this has potential to be in a hospital environment, in a doctor's office. We've had the pods in client offices. We've had the pods in conferences. In fact, the pods are so popular, they are right now, this year itself, are going to be traveling to 180 different separate events in the US this year. We are hoping to evolve the technology in the future. We are hoping to do a more rigorous double-blind control study, and would really love to hear any input from you, any thoughts from you. If anyone wants to partner with us to further develop it, we are more than open to listening to that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anil. All right, Jen, please.
We're all very excited to get up here and talk. So I'm from Plasticity Labs, and I'll play the slide if you want to throw it up. I have a few slides just because I always love visuals. It makes me happier to have visuals. So, which this isn't it. It's a nice visual, though. It makes you feel good.
I think it's good.
Yeah. He's putting it on. But I'm from Plasticity Labs, as Amy mentioned, and we are on a mission to give 1 billion people the tools to be happier, healthier, and higher performing. So it's a big, lofty goal. It started about 7 years ago when my husband and I went through a trauma, and he, as a former pro athlete, realized that he had psychological fitness that had been built up over many years. And we also realized that people who are athletes tend to get coached, but the average person doesn't necessarily get that kind of coaching. And that's an unfortunate thing, especially for young people. So we built the platform, and it's really about rewiring. Obviously, many people of you, will understand the concept of neuroplasticity. You're here at TransTech. You were understanding every single word that the last speaker said, so you're obviously pretty high level intellect. But what we're really trying to do is sort of think about the way that work currently exists. And right now we look at measuring stuff like engagement, which is way downstream. And what we should be doing is looking at inspiration. We look at a cluster of traits actually called the hero traits. They're called hope, efficacy, resilience, optimism, gratitude, and empathy, and mindfulness. And those 7 clustered traits are actually what lead us to high performance, but we have to practice them daily so that we can actually get to the place of feeling engaged at work and then flourishing. And we're way too far downstream at work. We're working on solving problems that are actually too late in the game to make an organization successful, and they're not making people happy at work. Most people actually want to get the hell out of work on Friday. Most people, 90,000 hours we spend at work in our lifetime, and most people are just showing up, checking out, and saying, get me out of here on Friday, and dreading coming in on Sunday. which is also not very good. So we're looking at the whole being. What are the things that actually impact the whole being at work? And it is, our personal lives. The speaker yesterday called that domestic warfare, I think, which I thought was fantastic. We're looking at all different levels of impact that goes into our experience inside the workplace to make us higher performing. We don't bifurcate between work and life anymore. It's definitely a continuum. And we need to be looking at every single person in this state of work-life continuum so that we can address the stuff that's stressing them out at home and stressing them out at work. And so we live upstream in those hero traits, as I mentioned. I went by that pretty quick, but this is what we look at, these hero traits and how these are actually leading to performance at work. And so this is an example of, a healthy work-life experience where employees are being asked to self-report on their own hopefulness, their inspiration, their level of stress, their happiness, and instead of asking if they're engaged or productive. That isn't going to matter if they have no hope. They're not going to be inspired. And so these are the things that we look at, and I'm just showing you, these are some of the folks we work with, but I was showing you those graphs pretty quickly, because I only have a few minutes up here on stage, but also just to give you an example of all the things that we measure and analyze, and then we look at these analytics every 90 days so we can assess how people ebb and flow in life. I know as a Canadian, February tends to be a typically rough month for all of us. So that's why we pull in stuff like weather data and analyze different types of open data to be able to be proactive inside of those months in various parts of the world. We don't see the same issues in Vancouver as we would, in Ontario as we would in Dominican Republic. It's very different. And our things that impact us externally, they are a big they're a big cause of stress. So a few of the customers we work with, Lulu and Earls, and we work in healthcare, we work in government, actually in big sort of clunky organizations mostly is where we come in and do the most help and support. Again, looking at things like healthcare, and if we increase empathy in doctors and nurses, how that translates into better patient care. We work in banks and call centers, and we do empathy exercises every morning with those call center employees so we can look at de-escalation of calls and creating relationships, and then mapping it to customer experience and showing how NPS and ENPS scores actually change. We're looking at all different types of input so that we can measure if emotional intelligence improves. And then finally, with the hero generation, we work with 3-year-olds all the way up to post-grad, and it is my most favorite bucket-filling part of this job. When you hear little 3-year-olds learn how to say efficacy and understand what efficacy means is so empowering. They have their little snotty noses and they go, efficacy, and they describe what that is. It's mind-blowing. Hero gem is what they call, and what we work on, and they become heroes by giving gems every day. And one of the best stories that I have out of this is this one little girl in this one school. They all get gems that they carry around in their pockets. And these gems get given to people when they're expressing one of these hero traits. And we walked through the school one day, and my husband thanked a janitor for doing something nice, and this 3-year-old girl came up, 3 or 4, came up and took a ruby out of her pocket and put it in my husband's hand and closed his hands together and said, "I saw you expressing gratitude." And I wanted to say that I appreciate that. So lastly, and I'll end so that everyone else can speak here, I'm just going to play this video, and it's our newest part of our product. It's our AI. Her name's Mira, and she's the guide that puts you through your own path and your own experience. We're working with kids where we're able to assess whether they're self-reporting happiness and unhappiness to a point of stress over time. And if we start to see in the algos that they're saying that they're stressed, or they're using words like self-harm or suicide in our high school classes, what will happen is that an SOS button will pop up, and they can connect to anybody online so that we can try to prevent any sort of really big events. And we're going to track to see if we can actually reduce suicide, reduce anxiety in young people. That is my goal. You can tell I get emotional about it. But here, just meet Mira, and then I'll close. Oops. Can you hit play?
Hello, my name is Mira, and I'd like to welcome you to your path. A path is a track made by continual treading. Your plasticity path is similar. Behaviors that are repeated with intention over time lay a track inside the brain. This process is called neuroplasticity and is at the heart of the plasticity platform. These neuropathways are formed when people learn new things and then reinforce that knowledge through regular practice. Long-lasting change begins with a few tiny but intentional steps. Your path begins with those first small steps. Brief actions are broken out into daily activities. Over time, those actions become habits. Each day you'll be invited to do one activity targeting a trait to improve your emotional intelligence or well-being. Sometimes you might want to top up your practice or try something new. In that case, check out the My Path section for a selection of single activities. Some activities might be challenging or push you out of your comfort zone. Keep an open mind and know that challenging yourself advances personal growth. And remember, a lack of practice and a lack of skill are very different. Science shows that complex habits may take longer to form, but with effort and intention, people can experience the benefits. It may be challenging at first, but in time it should get easier. The key to success? Sticking with it. As your guide, I will be here to shape your learning experiences. I will help you track your progress, review your activities, and analyze your progress through your personal journal. Tracking your happiness is fun and a helpful way to visualize your areas of growth and see opportunities for improvement. Remember, I'm just your guide. At the end of the day, it'll be up to you to choose happiness.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Jen. That's amazing. Great work. I think we're going to kick it over to you, Jonathan, to share a little bit about Spire.
Sure. So at Spire, we spend our day thinking about breathing, the breath, respiration. I think everyone here understands how this breathing is this very simple but extremely powerful part of our physiology. And so what I want to tell you about is some of the outcomes that we're creating. We've got some really exciting research that's about to be published and some more data there. But just really quickly, for those of you who don't know what our product is, and I just give you a quick introduction. So the product we have is a Spire stone. It's this little tiny stone that you clip to the waistband of your pants or onto a bra. And our core technology is to be able to continuously and accurately measure respiratory patterns, things like inhalation time and exhalation time, respiratory rate variability. And the core of the experience with this product is to try to shorten that awareness between when your body becomes physiologically stressed and when you're consciously aware of it. And so Spire is able to see those changes in breathing patterns that correspond with stress, that correspond with tension, or correspond to the positive with calm and focus, and make you aware of that. And we're often able to make you aware of that before you're consciously aware of that. And just moving that awareness a little bit has a very, very big impact for a lot of folks. And so we were recently very honored that the Stanford Psychology Lab, Aaliyah Crum, who's a great researcher in stress, chose our device to deploy into a study at LinkedIn. So they took about 200 employees at LinkedIn, and this was a very simple kind of blind study. It took 200 employees that were interested. Half of them were in a control group and did not get the Spire stone, and then half of them did. And then did before and after standard psychological assessments. So the two biggest ones are the perceived stress score that probably a lot of you are familiar with, and it's a score of pretty much what it sounds like, perceived stress, and the MASQ, the Mood and Anxiety Symptoms Questionnaire, and before and after. And we just presented this at the ADA, the Anxiety and Depression Association of America and are about to publish this. But just by wearing this device and having those small notifications, that little bit of awareness, we were able to significantly lower perceived stress for those who had the device versus the control group, and significantly improve on the mood and anxiety symptoms questionnaire versus the control group. And in fact, we saw from our own data about 23% less anxious days for folks, about 33% more focused breathing, and about 40% more calm breathing throughout the day. And so that's something we're very excited to. It's in fact the largest study of deploying devices like these into a workplace for the purpose of improving stress and anxiety. But just that small little difference, just that little bit of awareness using technology for a very simple and subtle way does have a really big effect. And I thought that was the main purpose that we're here to talk about, but I thought I'd end with kind of a PSA, if you will, something that we're about to publish on Monday. We're very, very fortunate that our device is quite widely deployed. We are, in fact, the only wearable device other than the Apple Watch that is sold in every single Apple store in the world. We have a large number of customers. And what that allows us to do is to start looking at population level data. For example, a little less than a year ago, there was a fairly traumatic event in the United States, the election I'm referring to here. And we published something, you can look at this on our website, where we looked at breathing, our breathing stress data for people in the US. And you may be shocked to know that we saw more tense breathing than we had ever seen on that night, and particularly exactly at the point where they announced that Donald Trump had been elected president. And so there's fairly amazing data there. And one thing we're publishing, I just want to mention to this group, probably on Monday, is we recently, there's been these unfortunate fires in the North Bay here. And of course, we measure breathing. And you've seen the pollution get really, really high. And in fact, we went and looked at our data of people in San Francisco and in the North Bay who are breathing that pollution. And one of the things for aggregated breathing from pollution is you look at something called the inhalation to exhalation ratio. Essentially, if you have asthma, it's a constriction of the exhalation. And we saw worse breathing in the population in San Francisco than we had ever seen across that. So my point there, it's a little off subject for this, stay safe in the pollution. It's real and it really has an impact on your breathing. But more importantly, little changes, everyone knows this, but we're really able to prove that just those small changes in awareness, letting someone know that their breathing's getting tense before the conscious awareness, has a really big impact on employee health and productivity. And this study, I think for the first time, actually really proves that. So thanks for letting us share that.
Wonderful. And just to add 2 seconds before I go to you, Pooja, to add a personal testimony to the use of the Spire. When I was in the process of writing The Future of Happiness, I was testing out a number of different wearable devices. And the Spire Stone happened to be the one I was trying last summer when my daughter broke her neck. And it's fine now, fortunately. But I remember I was testing the Spire at the point when she broke her neck and we had to take her to the hospital. And counterintuitively, my Spire said I was super focused all the way to the hospital, through the doctor's appointments. And then as I was leaving the hospital, the Spire sent a vibration to my phone that said, "You're feeling stressed." And I was like, I know.
When you look at breathing patterns, there's this physiological measure of kind of how your body's responding to something. And so we see that a lot, that in places where we're forced to kind of perform because like someone we care about, your daughter, is in danger, right? Your body goes into this incredible mode where actually focused breathing is elevated. It's a form of stress as we measure it, right? It's a elevation of your respiratory rate, but it's very regular on the respiratory rate variability. And so we see that often, right? Where here you're in a place where your mind is, I need to help my daughter's health, and we go into this incredible mode where yes, there's this focus stress, and then once she was okay, then the real stress, the real stress. Right? I think you're fortunate that, or maybe not fortunate, but you've spent a lot of time being aware of your conscious. So many of our customers don't, right? They haven't practiced mindfulness to the extent that you have. And so, we see this as this way to bring a little bit of that mindful awareness into their day. But thanks for sharing that. And, we're very blessed to have tens of thousands of customers that can
I
have
really
stories
felt like
that.
it helped me to be more mindful of the person that I wanted to be in that moment, and helped me to de-escalate the stress level. So that was pretty powerful to be in that moment, testing it at a critical moment, and to see how effective it was for me. So love the Spire. All right, Pooja, your turn. Share with us about Novolux.
Very good. So thank you for having me. One of the things I'm feeling right now is excited, but one of the other things I'm really feeling right now is anxious. And I know that because this device I have on my hand keeps pulsing and telling me that I'm feeling something different and my heart rate's going up. And if I had the Spire on right now, it would probably be doing waves. But I'm anxious because I'm hearing so much of what the folks here are presenting, and I keep finding myself thinking, my goodness, how is this all going to come together? And I'm excited and I'm anxious about that, and so bear with me as I'm excited to have the conversation with these folks. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll tell you a little bit about Novolux. So I have spent 22 years underground, interior spaces. I worked for 7 years at NYU Langone Medical Center in the operating rooms, which were all underground. I worked for 3 years at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston in the operating rooms, which were all underground. I worked at a lab at Mass General Hospital for 4 or 5 years, and that was in an interior space with the doors closed. But that's okay because the hallways had light, but I never left my bench, so it didn't really matter. And, in these spaces and spending time in these spaces, it occurred to me that I've been devoid of light for much of my day, for much of my life. And I set out about 18 months ago to start this company with a brilliant co-founder, and it's Novolux. And what we do, our overarching mission is to connect folks with humanity. And we do that. It's connecting folks like myself who spent so much time in these interior spaces with my family, with my friends, with my environment. And we set out at Novolux to do a very simple thing to connect humanity. It's lofty, but it's simple. And we're creating, we thought we would do this by creating a window that you could put in interior spaces, a window that you could put in windowless spaces that now brings light where there was darkness. And we do this by bringing not only and replicating the light of the sun outdoors and replicating the conditions. We do this by also coupling that with real-time views of what's happening. And I didn't actually bring slides, but what I will say, I realized yesterday that one of the things that would be very helpful to folks as I talk about this is to visualize what this technology is. So if you all do want to visualize the technology, you can actually text 44222 and just say power of light, and you'll actually get a demo of what this looks like. But bear with me for a minute because I'm going to have you visualize what this is. It's a window. I'm trying to create the most unnoticeable product out there. It's a window that looks like a window in your regular room. There's LED technology coupled with the latest in LCD and a camera outfitted with sensors. And that camera is looking outdoors in your interior office space. So I have an interior office space again, but this time purposefully. And what I'm able to do is in my interior office in Boston, Massachusetts, I have a window, and I'm seeing what's happening outside my building because my camera is placed outside there. And that sensor is picking up the exact color, the temperature, and the intensity of the light. and it's bringing it into my interior space. And I get excited about this because I look at the possibilities of what we're going to do. So one of the ways we started this out is that we put these windows. It started when a physicist and a physician bumped heads 3 years ago, at a hospital in New York. And they bumped heads and created this window for an ICU unit in this hospital that was completely windowless. And they put about 15 of these windows into this windowless ICU and collected data over 2 years, and realized that when patients were waking up, the nurses in that unit were not pumping the patients with as many drugs as they used to. The patients in that unit had a line of sight to outdoors, and there's a term called ICU delirium for anybody that's had surgery or knows anyone that has. These patients had less ICU delirium. And the nurses in that unit, it used to be a unit where nobody wanted to work. The nurses in that unit would go to their managers and say, I would love to be in the unit with the virtual windows. There was an excitement about having these there. Physicians who never got to see the light of day, most of them, the ones that I used to work with in all those hospitals underground, were excited to be in that space. And so it realized, so to give you a picture of what we're doing, we're trying to take that and put them in hospitals, in cubicles, in call centers, all places where folks are in sort of light-deprived spaces. So I'm very excited to talk, and talk further with many of you who are developing platforms that can be used in the portal that we're creating. So thank you for having me.
So you can see why I love these 4 panelists, all of them doing such amazing work in such different fields, but very impactful to changing the way that we do work. We have about 10 minutes, so I might change up the format we talked about a little bit. And I just want to pose one question to you, and that is for the audience members who are hearing about all these different technologies. They work in different places where they want to bring in something to raise well-being. How does a company select the right kind of intervention to bring into them? And I know you're all biased, but how have you seen other clients make that decision point about, is this the right type of intervention that they need?
I can maybe start. I mean, we're at Spire, we start with the outcome, across everything we do. What is the health or wellness outcome that this needs to drive toward? And I think when you look at deployments, when you look at any kind of population base, you've got to start by thinking about, what outcome is really going to move the needle for someone, right? Is it for my entire employee base? Is it just for a subset of employees? It's about all of these technologies. Technologists like myself, we get involved. We like to talk about the technologies. We like to talk about what it does. But ultimately, it's about the outcomes that you're creating. It's about the outcomes that you're creating. And so I think that's a motto we have. I think that's a motto that we've seen success, whether it's our product or other products, when something is deployed with an eye towards what is the outcome you're trying to create, and is this an outcome that's really going to change someone's life? That's where you see the most success. And I think a lot of times where there's been, to be fair, quite a lot of failures in deploying technology in employee wellness, and you have very poor engagement, right? And you have very poor adherence. And I think that's when there's a mismatch between, fundamentally, if you kind of break it down, it's when there's a mismatch between what is the outcome that the employee or the company cares about, that either the individual really sees as a problem that they're looking to solve, or that the organization is kind of collectively pushing as something to solve, versus what the technology does. And I think if we keep our eye focused on the outcomes and driving the outcomes, and finding the best technologies for those outcomes, and everything goes much more smooth, and you're able to create the transformation that you really want to be able to create.
I'll add one more thing to what Jonathan said. I think a lot of the things that all of us in this room are doing are creating just one more tool that an employer can use. So if you think about, happiness, we try to solve that by offering, vacations and massages and Reiki and, and all of these different things in the environment. But I see a lot of what we're doing as, just one more powerful tool in their arsenal. And measuring that impact and measuring the outcome becomes quite important.
I'll just add one thing to that. And what we've noticed is it's really crucial to have the employer on board, because for the actual promotion of these technologies, if the employer is invested and they really disseminate the information among their employees, they perhaps put incentives in place, that makes a huge difference to adoption. To me, so that's one of the key things that we look for.
I would also say, for us, we really look at the problem space. So when we work with various organizations and even in schools, it's, how do we help low socioeconomic schools needs? How do we actually create gratitude in schools that have all the financial benefits in the world, which is a tricky thing? How do we improve diversity in the leadership team? How do we retain millennials? And so the decision around how you actually work with that specific group is very different. And I think it's about understanding what is the problem space in each individual situation and then attacking that problem with the solutions that fit. And it changes, but you have to find out. You have to ask the right questions, and then and learn, and take the time to actually be an empathetic leader and find out what really matters, and then address what really matters to those people.
Absolutely. So one of the challenges I've seen to corporations being able to deploy technologies like these has been that there are a number of skeptics who wonder, why do we need technology to create these benefits? What's the point of technology? Why don't we just get together and have a social outing together? So share with me a little bit about why or what technology brings to the workplace that couldn't be replicated elsewhere.
I would say it's repeatability and scalability. For us, we're looking to, I was laughing when you mentioned the post-election response. Across all of our data, we track hope, and hope had plummeted by 40 points. And from a volatility standpoint, that is scary. What we saw is it rebounded, but now we're actually seeing it on the decline again, because that is a, big issue. But you can't track hope in every individual unless you have technology to give you some sort of feedback. And it doesn't need to be that you should stop doing those offline things. We still have the world's giant gratitude wall in our office space, and we still hang out with our employees. You don't stop communicating because technology's there. But if you could know across, like for example, we can know across 60,000 employees that hope has plummeted across all of these groups by 40 points. That means each individual manager can go in and have communication with their team about how to instill programming that could maybe increase hope. And that's where we look at technology as being there to offer that scalability and repeatability.
That's great. Thanks, Jen.
Maybe I could add, we take the viewpoint that we're not going to put Pandora's box back, right? It's been opened, right? People check their phones over 100 times a day, right? We've figured out how to create this incredibly addictive thing. And so we look at that and say, well, that's going to happen, right? How do we not try to regress? How do we try to build forward in the way that we want to build forward? And, we start at Spire with this very simple question of, well, what happens if one of those 100 times, at the right time, you looked at your phone and it just reminded you to take a deep breath? Just that, right? People are already looking at their phones. What happens if one time, at the right time, it reminded you to take a deep breath? And, as I was just talking about with that study, it ends up that if you do that, just that, you can have, a very, very significant impact on some of these core, psychological and physiological measures. And so I think technology is a fact of modern life. It's here. We're not going to get rid of mobile phones, right? Hopefully we learn how to make them a more productive part of our lives. But it's here, and so I think the question we should be asking is, how do we use this technology that's here? How do we use the fact that we're constantly connected? How do you use the fact that someone's constantly looking at their phone to create those little changes? And obviously where we started was, well, let's make one or two of those 100 times you look at your phone, say something that reminds you to do something that helps with your health, and that leads to great outcomes. But I think that's where technology plays, is that people expect things to be delivered via technology now. And so you've got to meet people where they are and then take them where you want them to go.
I think, and if I can add to that, I think listening to some of the presentations, I think sometimes technology serves as the best solution or the best alternate solution. So you look at what you're stationed with. You can either do a major capital renovation that costs $20 million, or you can substitute it with our technology that costs much less. And I was thinking a little bit about what Dr. Jepson said, and it's, thinking about putting an MRI. I had to build an MRI suite at one of the hospitals I worked in, and we spent millions upon millions of dollars putting this in. The alternative that she's providing, the technology that she's bringing in, and her company's bringing in, is it's a no-brainer for the institution. So sometimes I think we look at, I know it's getting close to lunch, so yeah, the funnies are coming. But you sort of think about it in that way. I think sometimes we think of technology as being cost prohibitive, but sometimes it's actually just the opposite. It's actually going to help the institution. So we have to get our employers to see that.
One of the news articles describing our technology had this really catchy phrase that I love. It said, "Plug in to get unplugged." And and it's true for a lot of us to really get into that relaxation, mindfulness space. Some of us can have the ability to unplug from all our electronic devices and go to a retreat or do yoga or do mindfulness meditation. But for a lot of us, we don't have that ability, or we are too caught up in technology. And for these folks, I think bringing technology to them is another way of enabling them to relax and achieve happiness. So that's what we believe in.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for sharing your wisdom with the audience. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.